So I'm really excited to announce the first speaker. I think that in order for this community to make the kind of impact that it needs to make on medicine, there's going to have to be a significant mindset shift for all of us. In the very first functional forum, I said we need to start acting like we're winning and stop acting like we're losing. That was the beginning. In order that for the next phase, we need to act at another level. So it's my great pleasure, and please give a warm Miami welcome. I've been waiting to play this track as my intro music for a long time. Welcome, JJ Virgin.
Miami, South Beach, bringing the heat. Can y'all feel that?
So what if the biggest thing you could do in your practice had nothing to do with nutrigenomics or lab testing or nutrition or supplements? What if there was something that had to go on top of all of that in order for you to make a difference with your patient? Want to know about it? Yes. You sure? Yes. So I can't go back. So can you, there you go. All right. So that seems odd to say for being a nutritionist. And I've been very fortunate over the last decade doing PBS and being on Dr. Oz and being on TLC. But along the way, you know, people see that outward facing and they go, oh my gosh, that's been so great. But they didn't see the struggle. Anyone here struggled as you've gone through your career? Like you see a little bit, you see that and you see the shows, but what you don't know is that I was on Dr. Phil for 2 years, and when I was on Dr. Phil for 2 years, I got a primetime show on ABC. I was the star, called You Are What You Eat. Anyone hear of that? Yes. It never aired. It aired in other countries, but not here. Then I wrote these books. Now, before these books, these are 4, before these, I wrote a book called The Art of Losing It. You never heard of that because I got in a fight with the person that I wrote it with, and I didn't realize he wanted to self-publish, I wanted to publish. I didn't realize that what I'd signed with him, the agreement I'd signed with him, gave him 50% of everything that I was going to do for the rest of my life. Right? That's when I got an attorney that I keep now with me all the time. Then my next book I sold was called 6 Weeks to Sleeveless and Sexy. Anyone hear of that? There's always one. There's always one. Thank you for buying that book. You were the one of 1,000. So there was that. And there were a lot of other struggles along the way. But I always thought that if I had these guys, you know, if everything was cool with my kids, that I could handle it. This is my big guy Grant and my little guy Bryce. And there was a lot of stuff going on there too. My big guy Grant got diagnosed with bipolar. Right at the same time he got diagnosed with bipolar, my dad got diagnosed with cancer, and my marriage blew up. It was super, like the worst struggles ever. But again, I thought, all right, you know, financially things were rocky, divorce going on. Actually divorced my husband because he wasn't contributing financially, and then I got sued for alimony. Right? I know. Just, right? Yeah. So this is all going on, but I keep thinking, you know, I can handle all of this as long as everything is fine with my kids. I'm good. Any parents in the room? Yeah? So, right? I mean, like, you know, things blow up, but as long as your kids are okay, we're cool. So I met this amazing agent. It was one of the cool things that happened from when I was on TLC's Freaky Eaters. Did anyone see that show? See, this is why these shows get canceled, people. Not helpful. I actually prayed for that show to get canceled because I was stuck in all sorts of weird parts of the country dealing with people who like to eat tartar sauce as their sole food, and it was a tough thing. But one thing I did get from that show was I got an amazing book agent and someone who finally believed in me and saw my vision and took what I was doing, which I was like obsessed with weight loss resistance. I was going around the country teaching these courses to doctors on weight loss resistance, and I wanted to write the book on that. And she goes, no, you need to do that food intolerance thing. And I go, really? That's like so obvious. You know, it's usually that thing that you're doing that makes you unique and special. right under here, it's right here, that's the thing you got to take out to the world. And you often can't see it. That's where a coach really helps. But she got me this amazing deal to do the virgin diet. And I knew that this was going to take it out to the world. So I invested my entire advance into it. And then I borrowed too. Money I didn't have. I was all lined up for this thing to be amazing. And I remember I got home. I'd been preparing. I did a PBS show on it. I'd been preparing all day for that PBS show. And I came home. And I walk in the door, and my then older guy, who was 16 at the time, was in a bad mood. He'd gone from school, left school early because he'd had a migraine, but now he'd miraculously recovered, and he wanted to go to martial arts, right? But I had a rule, like if you could not stay in school, you didn't get to do the fun stuff, right? Well, he got madder and madder, stomping around, throwing things, and finally he looked at me, and he goes, "Mom, I'm not as strong as you think I am," and he stormed out of the door. My younger son, who was then 15, walks out and he goes, "God, what a jerk." I'm like, right? So I go back into the garage. I start burst training. And the next thing I know, about 20 minutes later, my younger son runs in and he said, Mom, come quick. Grant's been hit by a car and he's been airlifted to the local hospital. Now, you know airlift is a bad thing. And the next time I saw Grant, this is what I saw. This actually is the cleaned up picture of Grant. When I saw Grant, he had bones sticking through his legs. He was covered in road rash. He literally had glass sticking out that I would pick out for months afterwards. He was in a deep coma, and the doctor came to talk to us and told us that he had a torn aorta, kills 90% of the people on the scene. He had multiple brain bleeds. He had diffuse axonal injuries, and he was in a deep coma, completely non-responsive. And he had 13 fractures, including a crushed heel, and both femurs were broken, and his tibia was sticking out of his skin. And he said, with these injuries, we can't fix him here because we have to use a blood thinner, and if we were to give him a blood thinner to fix his aorta, his brain will bleed out. So basically, you can have his brain, or you can have his aorta, but you can't have both. So my ex-husband asked him, what would you do if this was your kid? A great question to ask. And the doctor said, well, there is a doctor who could do this surgery, but he'll never survive the airlift. And even if he survives the airlift, he's not going to survive the surgery. And even if he survives that surgery, the chance that he's going to be anywhere near normal, he's going to be so brain damaged, it wouldn't be worth it. And my younger son, then 15, looks at him and says, so like what, a 0.25% chance? And the doctor says, yep, that's about right, son. And Bryce looked at him and he said, we'll take those odds. Smart kid. So we take him to the next hospital. I literally drive there at 2 a.m., not knowing if I'm going there to pick up a body. Get there, and it's just full court press, game on at this hospital. They are ready. They have 5 surgical teams in there. The doctor walks in, he goes, are you the mom? And I go, yes. He goes, I got this. I do this all the time. I had someone thrown off the overpass last week and I fixed them. Don't worry about it, go upstairs, I'll come get you when I'm done. I'm like, all right. I went upstairs, I wrote a blog post, he comes up, he goes, okay, I'm done. He's fine. Now, as far as his brain, I'm just the plumber. I have no idea if he'll ever wake up. So I go up there, and he is in a deep coma, but he's alive. And I'm in there with him in a deep coma, in the ICU. And I've got this book coming out in a matter of weeks that I've got everything invested in, and I've got my son in a coma, and I know the number 3 leading cause of death, and I'm not going to leave him in the hospital. But I also know that I'm the sole financial support for my family, and I have everything plus invested in this book, and then I'm gonna have to pay for all of this. So I've gotta do both, and I don't have a choice. And I look back at this, I went through 4.5 months with him in the hospital. The book became a New York Times bestseller. The PBS show became a big hit. He comes out of the hospital and people are like, how the heck did you do that? And I was completely on autopilot during the time. I just was focused. I knew I got super essential. Number 1 was my self-care, because I knew I couldn't go into the ICU if I was sick. So I was extreme self-care. And then number two, I was either there for my son, doing what I needed to do for him, or I was there for the book, and that was it. That's all I did. And I looked back after 4.5 months, which was just the journey, because he's coming out of now a traumatic brain injury. People were saying, how did you do that? What, are you Superwoman? How did you do that? And I realized that all of those things that I've gone through in my life, which we all have, we've all had those struggles, were actually the biggest blessing in disguise, because they were what prepared me for that. This is a study that showed that people who've gone through adversity, not extreme adversity, but not no adversity, they've gone through adversity in their life, are happier, they're more successful, and they're able to handle stuff. So I looked at all of this and I realized that basically I'd been in training for this, but more importantly, that we can train for this, that this can be taught, that mindset is a muscle and you can develop it. And you don't necessarily need to go through, bless you, what I went through to do this, right? You can actually learn it through lessons so that you can handle more. Because if you up-level your mindset, if you have that growth mindset as opposed to a fixed mindset, you can accomplish so much more in life. So the first thing I did as I started to test that was I realized, well, what we measure, we can improve. The challenge with mindset is it's so subjective. I'm going to need to make this objective, and I'm going to take this down and break it into traits so that we can look at each of these. These traits all together become the miracle mindset, and that you can quantify them so that you can then see where you are and where you need to be at your best. So these are forgiveness, abundance-minded, resilience, action-taking, living in the present, collaborative, and courageous. And the first one is don't wish it was easier, make yourself stronger. And I'll tell you, Grant now, it's been 4.5 years, and he's coming out of still a traumatic brain injury. And what's interesting is when he first started coming out of this, we actually were in Miami for a vacation. We're actually down in Key West for a vacation. And he went to go walk down. I was staying in one place and the rest of the family was staying in another. He wanted to walk over to the other place. And I had to check myself because I didn't want him to walk over there by himself. Like at first when he came home, I wasn't letting him walk anywhere by himself, which was making him worse. He was getting more depressed. And so I was gonna walk him over to the other house. And we start walking down the street and there is a car like way down there, and he takes a step out and I jumped him. Because I was like, I had such PTSD about this, and I had to check myself on there, and he was sitting there going, Mom, I have to do this myself. I have to do this myself. And I really took that in because I had a great coach early on who said to me, don't wish it was easier, make yourself stronger. And now when he says, okay, I can't remember these things, his challenges with his memory, can you just let me know when I have those appointments? I go, no, I can't. You have to do this. I'm not doing this for you. You have to step up. You can do this, but you have to get strong. Whenever he gets depressed and he doesn't know what his purpose is, I go, honey, this is not going to be easy. But you have a huge purpose in the world, but it's up to you. You have to make yourself stronger. And I believe we are never better than when we're challenged. And that's how we build that resilience muscle. When he was in the hospital, he had this crushed heel injury. And it was interesting because at first, I took things one step at a time. First, he had the torn aorta, we had to fix that. Then he had the brain injury, we were looking at working him out of that coma. Then he comes out of the coma, and now I'm trying to wake up his senses. And honestly, all of the orthopedic injuries seemed like the least of my worries until we started getting through some of those things, and I noticed he had this crushed heel that had a pin sticking out of it and a big open wound and the cast leaving that open. And the orthopedic surgeons came in one day and they said, we're just trying to make him able to walk again. Now, the first thing I did was take them out of the room because I managed every bit of talk around him. But I took him out of the room and I said, he's an athlete. What would you do if Kobe Bryant were in that bed? You wouldn't be trying to help him walk again. So I want you to treat him the way that you would treat Kobe. And it was interesting because I made a decision early on that he was going to be 110%. Not that he was going to wake up, not that he was going to maybe be able to walk again, but that he was going to be 110%, that this was going to be the best thing that ever happened to him, to me, to our family, and for that matter, as many people whose lives I could touch with the story. Think about how they treated us in the hospital with that attitude versus if I'd just been, oh, okay, hopefully you can just walk again. It was an entirely different situation. I love this quote. It's such a courageous quote. And I think about this, if you want to take the island, burn all the boats, because when this all happened, I reached out on Facebook and I reached out to my email list and I said, listen, I don't want your sympathy, I need your support. Any ideas you have, anything that you can do to help here, send it on in. And this one woman wrote, she goes, honey, don't worry about your job. It will be there waiting for you. You just stay in that hospital and take care of your sweet boy. And I'm thinking, I don't have a job. I run a company, and I have a whole lot of people whose lives depend on me having that company, who work for me, whose families depend on me. This is not an option. Moreover, if I fail at this right now, you don't get multiple times with New York publishers. I'd already had one failed book. I don't get a second failed book and ever get another shot at this. And I had a PBS show. So I would be completely bankrupt, looking at a son who, traumatic brain injury, the traditional hospitals and traditional medical community tells you it takes a tincture of time. They literally told me, now we wait, that there was nothing I can do. I was behind their backs giving them fish oil. I brought all sorts of stuff into the hospital when I knew they weren't going to listen. And I brought all the research, but they weren't buying it. So there was no option. I wonder what would happen if, when you're deciding what you want to do with your practice or that book you want to get out of there, if there was no option, if success was not optional, if you just had to do it. Because so often I hear from people, and I guess because I come from the weight loss world, when they say, oh, I'll try that. Well, in weight loss, when they tell me they're going to try the diet, you know what that means? They're going to go have a cookie as soon as they leave, right? There's no trying. Trying does not mean doing. Do not try, just do. Now, when Grant started to come out of the coma, the first thing he did was wake up. I'd never been around someone coming out of a coma. I'm sure someone in this room has, right? But I'd only seen the movies, so I thought he was going to wake up, smile at me, say, I love you, Mom. Nope, that was not what happened at all. He woke up and stared off into space and moved his arm like this. And I thought, oh my gosh, is this it? And I kept holding on to the 110%, and I started working on every type of thing that I could do to wake up all of his senses. I did sound, I did smell, I did touch, I did taste, I did temperature, and I would track every little thing. Because I'd had challenges prior to this of being in the present. But you're in the present when you're watching for these little things, and every little thing added up. I knew we'd get to 110%, not from going from 0 to 110%, but from going 1% to the next 1% to the next 1%. And I think back of Grant and Bryce together. They were in this room. Grant's in bed. Bryce was standing by him. And we were trying to get Grant to follow simple commands. And Bryce said, Grant, lift your arm. And Grant went like this. And this was the only arm he had free. Like everything else was in casts. And Bryce asked him to do it again, and it got up a little higher. And this went on for, 5-10 minutes. And it kept getting up a little higher until finally Bryce could sneak under enough to get Grant's arm on his shoulder. And both of them, it was just such a great moment. You could tell that Grant was so proud. And I think also pushing him further than he was ready to go helped all along the way as well. Because I noticed in the hospital, they kept going, oh, let's not do too much. But we just kept going a little bit more. And every little bit took him a little further out. It's like expanding your comfort zone. Now, I have a summit I do each year called the Mindshare Summit, and the whole philosophy of that is the rising tide lifts all boats. And one of the things that I've built my whole life around is collaborating. Just like James said, if a town buys into something, like there's always room for another great person. I'm in the weight loss world, and my top people that I work with, that I collaborate the best with, are people you would think would be my competition. When we're all sending out emails for each other, the best people for me to email for and email back are Dr. Mark Hyman, Dr. Sarah Gottfried, people who have very similar philosophies, because people aren't buying one weight loss book. They're not watching one video. They're not doing one program. So when you look at this, we all lift each other up. When this started to happen, I put the whole thing out in my Facebook community, and one woman actually kind of blasted me for doing it. But I knew two things. Number one, I was going to get a lot more help if I was very vocal about what was going on. But number two, I was going to be able to help a lot more people by doing that. because I was getting all sorts of amazing information that most people would never get. I had Dr. Daniel Amen coming to the hospital to help us. So I knew that I had resources that most people wouldn't have. And we were able to have all the research behind doing high-dose fish oil, which we started doing at the first hospital, again, behind their backs because they wouldn't go over 2 grams because they were afraid of bleed outs. And we did all sorts of other things, which I've categorized all in an ebook to give people, but we give that away every single week because people know the story and they come to us for the information. Now, along the way, we sort of jumped ship from when, we would do things in advance of when the doctors really wanted us to do some of them, but it all came from the very first surgeon that we found. And what happened that first night when we were at the very first hospital and they wanted us to leave him there, he was going to die in the next 24 hours, is they had to find a doctor who would accept the case. And there was only one doctor who did this surgery in Southern California and only really one option. And the doctor who took the case on, first of all, we had to track him down. It was midnight. Then he had to take the case. Then he had to assemble the other surgical teams, the orthopedic team, the neurosurgeon team, the critical care team. But then he had to find the stent that he wanted to use. And it turns out that the stent was part of a clinical trial that had ended 2 weeks prior. And so it wasn't around anywhere. So he had to find one of those. That had to get flown in. And then he had to put it into Grant, who was 16, but it was only approved for adults. And he just said, you know what? I figured I'd ask for forgiveness. I can fix him if he's alive. I can't fix it if he's dead. And speaking of asking for forgiveness, as I went through all of this, I still remember where I was when I got the call about the Virgin Diet, hitting the New York Times list. And then after that, I did 3 more books. And I would get these calls, and I would do the shows, and I just was on autopilot with everything, where I would do something, hit a goal, and I just started chasing the next goal. And nothing was giving me any type of joy. And I thought that, Grant was the victim of a hit and run. And this woman hit him, got out of the car, looked over, saw him, gasped, got back in the car, and left. And people during the whole time that we knew this kept saying, well, what are you going to do about that lady? And I go, she's got her own issues. I have no idea. Maybe he walked in front of the car. I don't know. I just thought I'd let it go. But I went through a workshop where you do forgiveness training. And I realized as I was doing this, because it was the reason I was no longer able to feel joy, that not only did I have to forgive her, I needed to forgive my son, I needed to forgive myself. But the forgiveness was really what allowed me to start to feel the joy again and start to work through this PTSD that I've had from this. So here's the latest of Grant. This is Grant's artwork. He was never creative prior to this accident. He was a very typical teenager. He's now very sweet, empathetic, very into gardening and art. It's not always pretty. He's got a brain injury. There are some good days and there's some bad days, but there's way more good than bad. And in some ways in his life, he's 110%. And some he's not, but we're still working on it. And as long as he's alive, I've got places to go with him and ways to work on him. It's all part of the next book coming out, The Miracle Mindset, and the documentary that comes with it, You Are Stronger Than You Think. That'll be on public television. And I just want to leave you with this one thought. Because it comes up all the time with Grant. He gets frustrated, he struggles. And my biggest line to him is, Grant, you're stronger than you think. You can do it. And I want you just to think, what would you be able to accomplish? What would you be able to do if you were stronger than you think? Thank you.